Yeah, we are live, and we're sitting down.
Yeah, Scott thought we should do this.
I said, let's just try it. See how it
Well,
goes.
I'm fine with it.
I mean, we're sitting, so we're just.
Yeah.
I don't know what you all think about it.
Hello, darkness, my old. I feel like we should be singing Simon & Garfunkel songs.
If you want a guitar.
Yeah, I could have brought my guitar. And the sounds and the words of the prophet were written on the subway walls and tenement halls.
I heard such an interesting cover of that. Where did I hear it? It was
like
in,
the hard rock one, or
no, it was a different one that I hadn't heard. It was on a TV show. I forget what show it was though. But
who is it? What is the kind of like the? Not but the really hard rock version.
Oh yeah, that one didn't that win a Grammy?
I don't know if it did or not. It was awesome. Where the guy just kind of hears that. It's one of those groups that sound like they're Satanist.
Yeah, they sound like Marilyn Manson kind of, or not Rob Zombie kind of. Wait, where do I see? How can I see? I saw somebody just clicked or something. But comments and reactions. There we go. Oh, hey Sue Joner, how are you?
Hola, Sue.
I wish we could add to the broadcast, but you can't really do that unless you're we had a iPhone connection. I'm waiting for the next thing to be solved, but
yeah.
So so much going on in the world, as always, right?
Yeah, Suzanne. Is it a Susan or Suzanne?
I think it's a Sue.
Just Sue?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what she goes by.
Do you take you down to her place by the?
Hey, Jeffrey Carter, our voiceover guy from California. What's on the truck today?
What's on the truck? I like it. We are just regrouping. We haven't.
And we're sitting today.
Yeah, this was Scott's idea.
I said, let's sit. Let's see how it goes.
I'm feeling anxious.
You can adjust your seat, too, if you want. It can go higher, it can go lower. I'm just saying if you want higher or lower.
I'm okay. I'm okay. I don't have any strong feelings about
these seats are $50, the best seating can buy at Lowe's.
It's nice. It's nice. Is this the one that Doug Pageant put together?
Yeah.
That makes it historic, too.
It is historic. So Scott Pruitt is gone.
Yeah.
What's interesting about that is, there's footage of him on the White House lawn July 4th. You see him schmoozing with, Mitch McConnell's wife and stuff.
Was he taking stuff?
Did he line his pockets of his tactical pants with plastic bags?
We'll just say there's a lot of rose plants missing from the rose garden.
Oh, we got a negative. Sitting is no good.
Well, why? Why is it not good?
Why?
Give us some reason.
AJ from West Windsor, New Jersey says sitting is not good. I mean, I don't mind sitting. It's just comfortable. I mean, we're not saying this is a permanent. Although the guy from New York, Matthew, what's his face, who's the rector with the beard, he always tells us sit down.
Wait a minute, that narrows it down.
Right,
rector
exactly.
with a beard.
Yeah. We have a good riddance on Pruitt comment.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting about?
I think I swung by a Chick-fil-A. I think he was making the fries today. I hope he doesn't mess them up.
That's his dream.
They're probably using chemical waste instead of peanut
exactly.
oil.
Hey, we don't need to. You know what's interesting?
Crude oil now.
You think of General Mattis, right?
Mm-hmm.
I really tend to think AJ from Princeton, from West Windsor says, how many reasons do you need, guys?
None if they make us feel bad.
Yeah, I mean, I like this thing. I like we can do this. Although I can kind of do this.
You could you can be Captain Kirk in the chair.
Exactly. He had great chairs.
Make it so.
You know what's so funny though about
Picard, yeah.
about the old Star Trek and even Star Trek: The Next Generation. Everything was so push buttony and weird. And the new Star Trek show, they have it down. Everything's just a non-visual, holographic interface, which is
kind of like my.
I said Matthew was gonna chime in. Matthew Bucheri from New York. Where's Lily? I know she'll be back eventually. My wife just made an Instagram post out of me and Lily. She's making shows together.
And by the way, thank you for the support, Matthew.
And Matthew, look, we're not standing. What do you think of this, buddy? You're constantly harping on us you're worried we're going to hit the ceiling. So I said to Bill, let's sit down today. Let's give it a try. Because we bought these seats when Doug Pageant came in, and because he's so big, I don't think he could have stood in here.
He's
one of my tallest friends who
He had a birthday this week. Happy birthday.
Happy
Doug.
birthday, Doug. But
Yeah.
so Matthew, are you less stressful watching us? I don't know.
We're making Matthew stressful
But-
because we were standing.
Well, he used to tease us. He teases.
Oh,
So
okay.
here's the thing, though. Like I see. Okay, Mattis, right? I think Mattis is probably not easy to replace. Like there's a guy that is eminently qualified.
Wait a minute. Jared Kushner is the one that has the Middle East folder.
That's true.
Administration.
This is true. This is true. Sitting is the new smoking, says the web. AJ, do you know how many active calories I burned today? This is not counting my resting calories. 1,685 active calories. My resting probably has me above 3,000 right now. So, looking good, but we want Lily back. We'll try to get Lily back. Oh, and it does make him much less anxious, by the way, Bill.
Oh, that's why I live. I live to make
Dude, we
make
live.
Matthew less anxious. If we can,
We live. In fact, that's Bill's.
you're an Episcopalian in New York. I don't know
how
that-
anxious can you be?
Yeah.
So this is the thing. If you look at like Mattis, there's a guy that's tough to replace.
Yeah.
Like eminently qualified, probably could have been appointed by either party in that role.
Eminently qualified. There we go. Yeah, there's a lot of people that can. Why don't we just move? What's his name over there? The doctor. We can. Move
That's what I'm saying. But I'm saying like Pruitt is a guy that like if Mattis leaves, well Trump might have it, but I'm saying Norman. There's a guy that's like, hey, we hope not to lose this guy, right? But Pruitt, I mean, how hard is it to find a Republican that wants to deregulate environmental regulation in favor of corporate interests and stimulating the economy?
Well, we got one.
I just feel like anybody, you could be like, hey, you intern over there, where'd you go? Well, hey, were you in the college Republicans at Dubuque? Go ahead, you're the EPA director.
Well, no, I mean we've upped one. The acting one was a lobbyist for the coal industry. All right, let's wrap our minds around that.
Now flip your mic like your smartphone, like your smart partner on your right. Flip your mic.
Oh, he wants it upside down.
Oh. I mean, you could put it upside down if we want. I don't know. I don't know why I don't have that. You know why I don't have that mic upside down? Because I feel like it would obstruct more. Because it's got a bigger casing, I feel like it messes up the video more. Like this microphone has such a small profile that it's not as obtrusive. I like that he has I feel noticed right now. I feel like people have I like that we're. By the way, happy Friday. We didn't say happy Friday.
Yeah.
Happy Friday. You know what I'm saying? No, it's just like anybody, like the guy who's taking over was a coal lobbyist.
Yeah. So we got that's all. Matthew, maybe you could be up for that job.
I love Jen Briney. I've had her on Give and Take before. She does the Congressional Dish podcast.
right,
And one day
yeah.
she was like, "Come on, clean coal. Just look at coal. Pick it up. What are your hands like? How can it be clean? Like you can't clean coal."
I had a grandfather die just because he shoveled it. It's not because he mined it, because he shoveled it.
We can't see whose eyes, mine. Oh, do you want me to flip my mic? Oh, you want me to flip my mic? Yeah, no, I like this mic this way. I could flip it, but I've only ever seen Howard Stern use this model of microphone. Not that that's why I got it, but maybe a little bit.
Now, what do you mean it's not why you got it? Of course that's why
his
you
is
got
in
it.
silver, but I don't know.
I think you were once described as if Howard Stern and Terry Gross
your
had-
description, or no, Krista Tippett.
Oh, if Krista Tippett and Howard Stern had a love child, it would be Scott.
I'll be your producer. Dude, hey, I like that. Matthew is a fantastic dresser. Last time I saw him in New York at the Mockingbird Conference, he had this suit on that was absolutely fantastic. I mean, it was and I think he got it for it looked like about a $900 suit he got for $200 or something like that, or maybe he has a guy.
You have a guy.
Yeah.
By the way, that reminds. I was watching. I've started watching the very Gary Shandling on HBO documentary, The Zen Diary of Gary Shandling. Fascinating stuff. Really apropos. Who was the guy?
Apatow, the widow Shandling.
Yeah, he did. It's interviewing people throughout his life, but they talked about how that part of the way he cut he looked in a suit, made a big deal about how well he looked and how hard he worked on it. And like most comedians, there's a core tragedy in his life, so it's worth watching on HBO. The documentary about Gary Shandling. I always I watched Gary Shandling that goofy. It was on some kind of syndicated TV when he did the fake talk show. The first
Oh, it was on HBO. And that
the one before. There was one before that.
Oh, I didn't know there was one before that.
Yeah, well, you were probably not.
Oh, this is the Gary Shandling.
You
show.
were no. There was one before that. There was a fake talk show that
3,000 for 300. What? Oh, that's his suit. It was. He got it for 3,000. Oh, why did that go so small?
Wow.
You see how small that is?
Yeah, can you you need to tell us where you shop.
That's very impressive.
Well, did you shoplift it and that was your fine? That's a good deal.
Oh, there we go. Canali.
Ah, very nice, very nice.
Well, Bill and I don't go shopping with you.
Oh, you're not promising that, are you?
I'm not promising it.
Yeah, but that would be good. It's a great deal. It's a great deal.
Standing interview with Mark Maron before he died was amazing. Shannon's gonna
yeah, I listened to that. Actually, you're right. It's very good. Yeah, I listened to that too. Mark Maron is almost as good at interviewing as Scott Jones. Almost.
I think Mark Maron's like, he's a very good show. I think he's a very good.
I enjoy that.
He's got SM7B. I know. I've read about his tech setup.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to, Chris. Yeah, I was thinking about now. Let's not share the podcast we listen to because you listen to the ones I listen to are so weird.
A lot of podcasts are weird.
Yeah.
By the way, are we going to go to the Slate podcast in July?
It costs a lot of money.
How much does it cost?
No,
not podcast movement. Slate Political Gab Fest.
Oh yeah, we can do. Oh, it's Glenside. Yeah, we'll do that. Yeah, let's do that.
I have a bead on a ticket for $250.
Oh wow, is that on Groupon?
No, somebody was on a Facebook. No, I mean that for the podcast movement conference.
It was
on. Somebody was like, I have a friend who's like can't go, and they'll sell it for $250.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
So it's a pretty expensive ticket.
All right. Well, why don't we record? Why don't we jump into our topic tonight?
By the way, I have a +1 for a free cocktail party for Adcast, who actually sold ads for on Give and Take. So if you want to go to a free cocktail party, maybe you don't have to register for the conference.
All right. Very good.
We should get new Persuasive Words cards before we go.
Ah, we should. Yeah. And maybe three $3,000 suits.
There's a guy named Harry Duran who he has a show called Podcast Junkies, and mostly just interviews other podcasters. But he went to Podcast Women a couple years ago and had this really great yellow T-shirt with this great logo, and he got like 500 of them and like Mark Maron took a photo with it because it's a great T-shirt. Like, and everybody's a podcast junkie and everything, and that his podcast went through the roof.
That's great. By the way, speaking of yellow, Belgium defeated Brazil this afternoon.
Belgium's color is yellow.
No, Brazil that's infamously the infamous yellow.
Belgium defeated Brazil?
Yeah. So Belgium and France will play Tuesday. Should be a great match. I think the winner of that match wins the cup.
Two people who are not paying enough dues in NATO.
Let's move on.
I was listening to this. What was it? Something today. It's all blending into each other. Oh, maybe I was re-listening to this thing for a reason to prep for something with Jonah Goldberg and Bill Kristol. They were talking about how Trump wants to be a monarch. I'm like, that's why you name your kid Barron. That is pretty weird.
Yes, and according to Montague, how you begin to get a dust spot and undermine liberty is to
You're reading your Montague.
Is to break down when you break down the separation of powers. That's how you lose your liberty.
A great name for a kid would be Duke of Earl. Duke of Earl Jones.
There we go. They work on it. Duke Jones.
Greg Strawbridge is calling. We can't take that call right now. We'd love to take the call. We'd love to have Greg in studio.
We could have a call. We're just a few steps away from a call-in show.
By the way, we played golf with Greg.
We did.
That was one of the nicest rounds of golf I've had in a while. Socially.
Well, that's because you didn't hang out with us. You had your own cart.
Well, we did it at the tees. At the tee of greens. But no, I thought it was nice. It was very, it's funny because I haven't played golf in years regularly. Yeah. And that's largely because it's a lot of time, but also like I always had a lot of people to play with, and it was very enjoyable. I greatly enjoyed playing with
I enjoyed it too. I went out last week with my son for his birthday, and we were on a city course, and we saw a doe dance, playing around with two of our fawns, and a coyote in the day.
I like that wildlife.
Wildlife, yeah, but you don't usually see it in Center City. Probably thinks he is a Barron. Yeah, I'm sure that kid won't have. I'm sure Barron Trump won't have any issues.
Wouldn't it be great if Barron Trump became like a liberal activist, like a human rights advocate or something?
chained himself to the fence his father builds. I like it. There's a lot of possibility there. All right, so we're going to get back to our series.
We're going to talk about Predestination today. I don't know. Our series is a lot less focused than we thought.
Well, but we're still trying. I mean, predestination has to do with we're talking about Calvin, and not just predestination in general, but we're talking about Calvin's doctrine of election, which has something to do about Calvin obviously doesn't have much room for human freedom, like none.
Well, yes and no. I mean,
well, I think the redeemed person has some. I think he has a.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think when you're redeemed, actually, he has probably a much more developed doctrine of sanctification and of what the Holy Spirit can do in a person and should be doing in a person, certainly than Luther does. So.
Well, I mean, is that a huge accomplishment?
Well, I
if you Luther,
I think there's
Adam Morton is going to ring in right now.
Oh yeah, we need that. But I'm sure. No, I mean Luther talks more about the Christian life than often is given credit for. That's all I'm saying.
And Luther's are all occasional. I mean, it's so interesting. Well, we should save this for the podcast. Okay.
Let's jump.
Let's save this for the Here we go. This has been a great warm. Happy Friday. Great warm up.
Good warm up.
Great warm up. I feel like there's lots we didn't cover. But
We were going to something. We originally were going to do a light topic for Friday on abortion.
We still might do something.
Let's
on
do
abortion,
but not for Friday.
because we were talking about
it's not a Friday conversation.
Like basically, the right to privacy is fascinating.
As an argument,
and also if you strike it down on that basis, then what could the state? It's just it's fascinating.
Well,
so.
All right.
So Bill and I have not been to law school.
To be continued.
That never stopped us.
But
before.
I played one on TV.
Exactly. It's never stopped us before. By the way, did you see on my Facebook? I posted a video about how Willy Wonka the chocolate.
I did.
That's
fascinating.
It seems like
it seems
indubitable. I mean, like, this must be a lot of borrowing from Dante. That's so awesome.
No, it is awesome. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yep.
Yeah, who said Dante's dark? And then when you go all the way down, and you shoot up to Charlie, she shoots up to the heaven. Like that's amazing.
But I like that. I mean, Johnny Depp is too obvious as Satan. Gene Wilder is Satan. That makes sense because he's kind of nice. But
Gene Wilder's fantastic.
Yeah, may he rest in peace.
Remember Blazing Saddles? These people are the salt of the earth. I mean, common folk. Morons.
My favorite, I love in Young Frankenstein. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to reason with him and treat him with human kindness. Do not unlock the door, regardless of what I say. And the first minute, open. I don't know. That's one of my.
By the way, how great was the
Bruckler.
Frankenstein Chronicles recommendation?
That was good.
I hope they're coming out with season 3. I'm not sure though.
I hope so too. All right, let's do.
Here we go.
Speaking of Frankenstein, let's do John Calvin's doctrine. That's a perfect segue.
Frankenstein. Okay, here we go. I'm gonna hit record.
Abby, somebody.
Let's see. There we go. Let's start over because I couldn't see it. This is episode 226, where we talk about John Calvin and predestination. I'm Scott Jones.
And I'm Bill Bohr.
And welcome back to the show.
Yes, we had a week off. It was good. Took a little break from things. You went to the beach.
Yeah, the holiday.
Yeah, it was. God bless.
Holiday.
God bless America. Yeah, I went to see fireworks in Lawrence Township, and occasionally a soundtrack with fireworks can be pretty interesting. Obviously, I heard the Colorado Orchestra one time play in Colorado Springs with fireworks. That was pretty amazing. They did the 1812 Overture. I've heard the music of John Williams with fireworks done, and they were synced. That was pretty interesting. But this particular fireworks had every particular song that ever had anything that even said America in it. So back to back, we had Neil Diamond, Coming to America, followed by that Toby Keith song about "We're going to blow you up, you foreigners who attacked us," and
yeah.
And then
so
at one
you
point,
had the song of hopeful immigrants that made the country, and then followed by xenophobia.
Yeah, and then at one point they had Guess Who, American Woman, which was an anti-American song. So our Canadian friends probably are singing that a lot right now. All right, very good. So we are back to our series, which we will be the first to admit that there is a thin thread, perhaps
Thin red line.
Well, I was saying a thin thread, easy for you to say, linking this theme together. But it began with a question.
By the way, we both look summer complected.
Yeah, we've gotten some sun, so
Yeah,
nice. Yeah, but it
do you use sunscreen?
I do.
SPF.
No, at least 30. Yeah.
Lindy says she uses SPF. A very white person. Very white.
At any rate, we had a question or a comment from one of our listeners wanting us to talk a little bit about our view of human will, human freedom, our anthropology. So we're
salvation.
Yeah,
the Christian life.
So we're
basically it was a very narrow question.
It was a narrow question that we are just roaming and rambling on. So we talked about Luther last time, and so now we're going to talk about John Calvin.
Unexpected, the Little Luther.
Little Luther, which actually, that was an interesting tying Teresa of Lisieux and Luther together. So we're going to talk about John Calvin today.
Bill and I have both been trained and spent time in the Presbyterian traditions. I always say, as a Presbyterian, you follow 3 JCs. Jesus Christ, John Calvin, and Johnny Cash. Not necessarily in that order.
Yeah, that would be your branch.
Exactly. Yeah, that's mine.
I think more Presbyterians should listen to Johnny Cash.
That would be like the AARP, the RP. That mine is the JCP, Johnny Cash Presbyterian.
Anyway, so you wanted to talk about. So why did you pick Predestination to do this for?
Well, because I thought it's something that when people bring up Calvin, it's a novel take.
Oh my gosh. Well, would you
have a favorite book on Calvin?
A favorite book on Calvin?
Yeah.
No, I can't think of. I mean, what's I'm trying to go through my library. I don't know. There's a book that compares his thought to Thomas Aquinas that I think is pretty interesting. I don't know if I have a favorite book on John Calvin.
Mine is Brian Gerish's Grace and Gratitude, the Eucharistic Theology of John Calvin. And what he says in the intro is that he's not writing on Calvin's Eucharistic theology. He's saying Thanksgiving is that grace and gratitude is Calvin's understanding of the Christian life. And so,
yeah,
it's now I also like to call it. The subtitle really should be A Kindler, Gentler Calvin.
Yeah. Well,
but if anyone wanted to read like a really good book on Calvin, it's like 200 pages. I think they were lectures originally delivered at Edinburgh or St. Andrews. And the book is fantastic.
I would throw out one that hardly anyone ever mentions is Louis Bourier's book, The Spirit and Form of Protestantism. It's written in the 40s. He's a Catholic scholar, but he actually was trying to talk about Protestant theology in kind of dialogue with Catholicism. He has a really interesting take on John Calvin. He calls Calvin a kind of logical mysticism, particularly because of the center being the absolute sovereignty of God. Whereas Luther is justification by faith. The irony, he says, of Lutheranism is that even though God does all the work, for Luther, it seems like the center of the whole enterprise is the salvation of humanity. So it really is a pretty human-centered kind of theology. Matter of fact, he says what you get with liberal Protestantism is you get justification of faith without any doctrine. And so that's kind of where I think he says. Whereas Calvin, he says, with this idea of a sola gloria, sola gloria Dei, that God is, God's sovereignty or the absolute majesty of God. He says that actually Calvin's doctrine of God has a lot of affinity with St. John of the Cross, and he places that, at least that dimension of Calvin's thought in the great tradition, even implying like some of the apathetic, bistic theologians. He actually sees there's a kind of mysticism in Calvin, even though Calvinists many of them would resist that idea.
Yeah, I mean, Calvin might not, though, because, I mean, you read... It's very interesting because my teacher, Bruce McCormick, would always say that if you want to look about what Calvin thinks about you with Christ, don't look to the Eucharist theology, which he writes volumes on. He writes more about the Eucharist than Predestination. Look at his debate with Osiander, Book 3, because when he's in Book 4, he's just being sentimental and reading patristic piety, and he's just being sentimental. I'm like, what? Where does that? Okay, I was trying to. Okay.
I always like when it's like when we say no, Karl Barth, you can't really say what you're saying.
Exactly. No, you can't.
You're not allowed because that's not how I understand you. No, I think Calvin's that little treatise on prayer in Book 4 is really powerful and beautiful.
Yeah, it's interesting too. So, two thoughts on what you said. Alexander Schweitzer, who was a 19th century kind of dogmatician, where back when in the 9th century you sort of, at least in Germany, the dogmatic enterprise was let's figure out the animating principle behind the Lutheran way or the Reform way.
Right.
And it was a big debate. It was like, it's justification versus predestination. And Schweitzer said, no, it's justification by faith versus, for the Reformed person, the distinction between the creator and the creature. Which is interesting because you think a lot about like the Eucharistic debates and the Christological debates and these sorts of things. I mean, the other thing I think is like the whole to glory to God alone, like Garish, who I like a lot, but and I think a lot of his brief dogmatics and outline, but man, his eschatology is like, well, if it's to glory of God alone, who knows if there's an afterlife, but there must be a creator and things go on. And I'm like, wow.
Man.
I don't have this guy preach anyone's funeral.
No. Well,
the beat must go on.
The beat must go on. Well, the interesting thing, you part of this podcast was set up in the last one because for Calvin, the doctrine of election was a remarkable comfort. I think this is where it's hard to see it's hard to find the man Calvin in his work. Often people say, I mean, Luther's all over every page of himself, but I think there is something when he talks about election. I actually think there's something there because Calvin's own sense of hope, his own sense of security in the midst of a life that had a lot of tragedy and in the midst of a very tumultuous time, I think was the comfort he found from, the sense that God had chosen him and that he was part of God's family because of nothing that he was accomplishing, but solely by the work of God. That comes across in Calvin, not so much in the later Calvinists, but it comes across as really a sense of great comfort and joy.
Yeah, and also, I think the argument for the bondage of the will and predestination Calvin, Luther bondage of the will, predestination Calvin, it's not just a recovery of Augustine, it's also a sort of in your face to a mechanistic understanding of who owns the keys to the kingdom, right? Well, if we excommunicate you, well, you're out. This day you're in, this day you're out. Even on a normal basis, the sacramental system could be like that. Aside from ecclesial manipulation, well, you're not playing ball, your whole kingdom's out. So there's this pastoral application. Well, the fact that you were in God's good graces is not in your control or the church's control, but this is, a work of God.
Right, yeah. No, and now the interesting thing that one of the things that happens in subsequential Calvinism is trying to figure out if you're party elect for your sense of security. This idea of having some sort of, whether it be religious affections or whatever, some sort of sign, assurance of the genuine presence of God. That insecurity that causes is part of what sets up both the Wesleyan kind of break from the Puritan tradition, as well as the need of the Great Awakening.
So I have two quotes I want to share. One is negative, one is positive.
There we go.
Do you want to start with negative or positive?
Let's go negative first and then end with positive.
Of course. All right, there you go. I knew you'd like negative first. I'm gonna illumine my light.
Oh, here we go.
My reading light.
There we are.
You like I have a reading light? I have a reading light? You like that, didn't you?
Hey, can I move it? I want to if I get to refill my beverage if I move a different panel.
Exactly.
It's like the Jetsons.
So this is a quote from a guy who wrote a book Peter Torsen, who wrote a book, which is a good book.
Peter Torsen. I know that name.
He wrote a book, Oxford Press, in 2009. It's a good book called Predestination, the American Career of a Contentious Doctrine. It's a very well-researched book. I don't have the paper copy. I just have it on my iPad. But
okay.
So he's talking about what happened in New England, and I came across it came back to my mind because I've been reading this book by Oakes, and he has a chapter on predestination. So he has this great quote from Turson that talks about what happened in Puritan New England with some of the certain excesses of Calvinism. This is sort of we're playing the game that certain Calvin scholars hate, Calvin versus the Calvinists, but they're not here, so we're gonna play. It's like, hey, you don't like Hold'em? Don't play at our table. So first, anxiety over one's predestined salvation entailed something of a catch-22. If you were not anxious about your eternal election, you were obviously not elect. But continuous, or at least cyclical anxiety about election denied you the very comfort that predestination was supposed to bring. Comfort, in other words, could be notoriously elusive in the system. Predestinarian anxiety all too easily passed from salutary struggle to genuine distress. The second problem was its sheer intensity. Not everyone was a spiritual marathon runner like Edwards or an accomplished soliloquist like Hamlet. Many Americans, including many Puritan lay people, were happy simply muddling through. They looked to religion for the sort of automatic and tangible comforts that medieval lay people once sought merely watching the Mass.
Yeah.
But such a view of the sacrament was the very thing Puritan clerics were bent on dispelling. So that's a fascinating...
That's an interesting description.
Yeah, where you have this, I like that. Yeah. Well, if you don't have some anxiety, you're not a Christian. But if you got too much anxiety, you're not a Christian either. So what's really the sweet spot of spiritual anxiety?
You can begin just from that phrase alone. It doesn't take much movement to understand why Charles Finney went to town.
Exactly.
why that was easy to switch.
I've got a system for you guys.
I can make sure you know. Well, and the other thing that's interesting too is, and Bourrier observes this, that, true Calvinism is and will always be a small minority movement. Just the very nature of the system. I mean, for a number of different reasons. He says its influence will always be disproportionate, but the actual adherence to it. I think part of it is because of this doctrine. It's hard. First of all, it's hard not to become a double predestinationist, right? And I think that the doctrine of predestination often is it's often the one that it breaks the deal.
So we have a comment coming from Facebook Live from Jeffrey Carter out in California. He says, "This is why I had to leave confessional Calvinism. They make election the center of the Christian life and give you more anxiety than reading Sartre."
That's a good.
I way more anxiety.
More anxiety.
I found Sartre therapeutic at times.
Right? Yeah. You just end up dying in a car accident if you're Sartre. But that's right. He died in a car accident, right?
That doesn't mean you'll die. I mean, you don't read a book.
Absolutely.
Wait. It's like you drink from Nostradamus' skull. Those people.
No.
That's a weird thing. People.
If you're reading Sartre while you're driving, you could die.
Well, you could text. More people die from texting.
Don't text.
That is interesting. People have dug up Nostradamus and tried to drink wine from his skull with the idea that you would get his power. And weirdly, I feel like several of these people died weirdly.
Yeah, that's just weaning out the gene pool. That's pretty common.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. When you're drinking from it.
That's Darwinism helping us right there.
Exactly.
So that's very good. Well, I think
Thanks, Bill. I don't. Is that sociobiological Darwinism? You just became an official sociobiological Darwinist.
If you drink wine out of Nostradamus' skull in order to get insight and die, motorcycle accident.
Camus died. Jeffrey Carter responded. Camus died.
Sartre killed himself then, right? Camus died in the accident. Sartre killed himself, I think, how it worked out. Nonetheless, they still were less anxious then. Well, and you'd have to ask, I think Beza would be responsible and Synod of Dort for predestination moving to the center of Calvinism, right? That would be post-Calvin.
Wait, Senator Dort.
The idea
that wasn't Beza, was it?
Well, but they learned from Beza.
From Beza.
Yeah. Right.
Well, everyone learned from Beza.
Well, then, so we can blame everything on Beza. But I meant, though, the people who, that's that idea.
So you're saying, yeah, this is the classical argument of Calvin versus the Calvinists, which what my teacher Charles Barty was fond of as our most sort of mainline-ish confessional sort of Calvin scholars, I think. More sort of conservative folks who, like people that are in, say, the PCA or the Orthodox Presbyterian Church, they generally want to say there's more of a direct connection between Calvin and the subsequent confessional tradition. Right. I mean, I think that's. I mean, it's not. I think both things are probably.
Yeah, you can make an argument both ways.
Yeah, but, yeah. So.
But one of the things, of course, we've said this before. If you really did believe that God alone is that it's all God in that way, if God elects and God elects both people for salvation, perdition. If you thought you were party elect, that should make you very humble. But that doesn't tend to be the chief virtue that I associate with that theological tradition. Now there are people, our friend. Strawbridge, he's a humble guy.
Absolutely.
And he's a Calvinist, but I would say he represents the minority of that kind of piety. And again, I mean, hubris comes in all forms. I'm not saying I don't have it, but it seems
hubris sounds fantastic. I read about these Greek tragic figures. Well, I mean, I don't read, but I mean, Barron tells me about them at the Friends Sidwell Friends in D.C.
You think Barron reads to Donald at night?
Yeah. Dad, what do you think of this, Dad? Hey, hubris, I would have won everything. I have no Achilles heel. I'd have been like Achilles without the heel. I mean, well, okay, I did have bone spurs, but that's different.
Yeah, well, he's a living argument against the First Amendment. But
did you hear also like at that rally in Montana, the 1,000 points of light?
He made fun of 1,000 points of light.
Like what is it? What the hell is it?
He's against.
Well, it's a metaphor for it's a picture for national service. All these people
volunteering,
and just in different things and just kind of making the country better through service.
Yeah. So in the same speech,
country better through personal service. I literally don't get it. I mean, why you pay servants? I mean, what you do, you pay the brown people, then you say you don't. That's what you do.
The fact is amazing. Last night in speech, he could insult 2 American war heroes in the week of July 4th. By the way, I'm reading a book on a biography, a Pulitzer-winning Prize biography about George Washington, and it's probably best not to do that right now.
I mean, the Constitution was written with Washington's sort of virtues in mind. I mean,
all right, yeah. Well, that's a whole other discussion. I mean, we're getting off of predestination, but
like Washington, I could never tell a lie.
But the idea of
I was watching the Nixon tapes. It's not a lie if the president tells it.
Yeah, the idea that a republic doesn't really survive without holding on to the core virtues that formed it. That's kind of the nature of republics. And so, anyway, that's one other reason that enjoy these July 4ths while we're having them.
After soon we'll have Trump Day.
Yeah, or something. Yeah. But anyway, so what would, I mean, part of the, I would say maybe even, I'm going to use a word I never use. Ready? Part of the missional interpretation of election is this idea that I think the best chapter about predestination or election in the Bible, or most helpful one, is Ephesians 1. I think those who base election on Romans 9 through 11, that's where you get most of your doctrine of election. You're misreading Romans 9 through 11. It's much more
Ephesians 1, and also in a different way, also Romans 8.
Yes.
Because Paul is dealing with a sort of his own concrete missional problem of where Jews and Gentiles, and so some of this is even hypothetical. I mean, he uses what if,
right.
Romans 9 through 11 is not the place to
build your
yeah.
doctrine. But the reason I'm saying that is because it very much carries on the tradition that the idea of Israel was elected for a purpose. It was elected for a mission, to be a light unto the Gentiles, and to be, God's an example of God, what it meant to be, have this kind of relationship with God, and it was to show the world that. And Paul ties, the coming of Christ and being in Christ as part of that ongoing, the idea of you are elected for a purpose, you're elected to mission. We are chosen in order to carry on that, to be a light to the world, to demonstrate the coming triumph of God in our lives.
So I'm going to open my reading light again.
All right, very good.
You agree with Edward Oakes, who quotes Ephesians 1.
Yes, I would.
And the praise to God the Father, who blessed us in the heavenly realms with every spiritual blessing in Christ, choosing us for the foundation of the world. And Oakes says, predestination then is really, this is a Catholic thinker, so is really the resulting realization that comes upon believers when they reflect how graciously they've been received and accepted by God, and how the circumstances that conspired to lead them to believe were not of their own doing, and were not, in Aristotle's phrase, up to them. In other words, the doctrine, is that really Aristotle's phrase, up to them? I mean, I think
that's how he said it.
Okay.
But that's the input. That's the
Okay.
intent.
All right.
Yeah.
In other words, the doctrine first arose out of a sense of gratitude for a gift that came in the fullness of time. In that regard, it represents the convergence of several realizations in a Christian's life. That God is eternal, and his very creation is a gratuitously willed gift that did not have to be. 2, that even though the world is sinful to its Adamic core, God can trump sin and outrun the sinner. 3, that among the mass of human beings on the globe, I, for reasons that have nothing to do with my merit, for I did not even choose to be born, let alone where or when, have been given the grace to know of this decision of God to outbid human sin. And 4, that the spontaneous response to this accumulating set of realizations can only be gratitude. This virtue, gratitude, is the core of Paul's doctrine, a gratitude that, at least in his case, is so powerful and overwhelming, it spills out in this extraordinary paean. And then he goes to Romans 8. What can we say to all this? If God is for us, who can be against us?
Matter of fact, if you go through and if you look at most of Paul's great theological insights, particularly when he deals with mystery, and this is throughout a number of the letters, after each time he talks about it, he ends in doxology.
Yeah.
And so I do think this fact is, gratitude. I mean, it's funny, when I would give this lecture about predestination, and generally I was not giving a lecture to those who were friendly to Calvinism, I'd always say, well, if you had to make a choice that your salvation was either in your hands or in the hands of God, which would you pick?
Yeah.
And I think that's where Calvin got the comfort. I mean, I think that's not Calvinism. That's the great tradition right there.
Yeah,
and it's grace alone. I mean, salvation by grace alone.
I think the two thinkers that in the 20th century, I mean, Leslie Newbegin, first in a book called The Open Secret, which is kind of his ecclesiology, missiology, one of his first attempts at it, but he made a huge part of election. And in the Bible, election is not some abstract metaphysical thing. It is totally about God choosing out people from the Adamic mess for the sake of others, for the sake of the world.
Yeah.
And then also Karl Barth, who thinks election is more about God than about us. Like the good news of election, he says that election is the sum of the gospel, that God, before all things, chose to be God for us and in no way without us. So
Bourrier says Barth may be more Calvin than Calvin. At that point.
Right. So you had this missionary impulse of election doesn't begin with us, but within God, who chooses to be God eternally in no other way than the way that includes us.
Yeah, and I think this is a quote I use maybe too much, but it's still one of my favorite quotes, I think, to tie this together, that I think sometimes is lost in extremes of extreme expressions of this doctrine, is from Thomas Merton, that humans have freedom and humans love. But because we're humans, our freedoms are not as free as we think they
Yeah.
are, and our loves are always less than.
That great Augustinian Calvinistic term,
Yeah.
concupiscence. It's
Yeah.
our problem. We wrongly ordered love.
But the good news is that human freedom, the limitations of human freedom, and the often inadequacy of human love does not prevent or hinder the freedom of God or the love of God. And so I think for me, when I think God is sovereign in the sense of God's freedom and his love are not hindered by human failure or human inadequacy.
No, it's a sovereignty of grace.
Sovereignty of grace. That's where we're at. That's where we stand on that one.
Happy Friday, everybody.
Happy Friday, everybody.
Well, that was fun.
Thank you for listening. And you notice that we are. It wasn't on purpose, but the last 2 weeks, both we have viewed Luther and Calvin through Catholic lenses.
What can we do?
What can we do?
Can we get a Chick-fil-A franchise?
Well, do we know who to even ask?
Scott Pruitt.
Scott, it didn't work for him. Or maybe he's got a
You know, the only thing that was illegal, interestingly, apparently, is the $43,000 secured phone booth.
I heard that.
That's the only thing that broke the law.
Everything else was just morally wrong.
Yeah, that's amazing. What law did that break? That's amazing. Because Ben Carson's $40,000 table, that didn't break law.
That didn't break law.
But the soundproof booth.
Well, the fact that the United States government is taxpayers are making the Trump family rich is not.
And there was a skiff in the EPA already. There's a skiff there. There's a soundproof room already. That's fantastic.
All right.
We're gonna make this soundproof. If you guys if you guys can give us $20,000, we'll make this room soundproof.
Matter of fact, we'd probably do it for $50.
Yeah, we'd have to cover. We'd have to.
Well,
soundproofing's pretty expensive.
Well, we'd have to wait a minute. $50 would be the good bourbon we'd buy to work while we're doing.
Soundproof actually would be like if somebody out next door, if we had a window, they couldn't hear anything.
Right. No. All right.
You know.
Well, we'll work on that. Take care, everybody.
Bye.